How to transform pain into power with a simple change of thoughts. Pain has a strange way of reshaping how we see the world. It makes colors fade, turns silence into noise, and transforms simple moments into reminders of what was lost. It doesn't just live in your memories. It lives in your nervous system. Every time you relive a wound, your brain fires the same electrical patterns it did the day it happened. It's as if the body can't tell the difference between the past and the present. That's why pain feels endless. It repeats until you learn what it came to teach you. But what if pain isn't the enemy you think it is? What if it's your body's most honest attempt at evolution, a signal that something in you is ready to grow? Neuroscience tells us that pain and growth share the same circuitry. The same region that lights up when you're hurt, the anterior cingulate cortex, also activates when you adapt, change, or learn something new. Pain, in its rawest form, is potential energy. The problem isn't the pain itself, it's the story you tell yourself about it. Every thought you attach to pain gives it direction. When you think, "Why did this happen to me?" your mind turns inward and your chemistry follows. Cortisol rises, dopamine falls, your body contracts. But when you think, "What is this trying to teach me?" the shift is immediate. You move from victimhood to authorship. The same neural pathway that once delivered suffering begins to deliver insight. It's not magic, it's neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reshape itself according to your focus. Descartes once said that clarity of thought is the foundation of freedom. Pain clouds that clarity not because it's powerful, but because it hijacks attention. The mind loops, searching for meaning in what it doesn't understand. Yet meaning doesn't come from repetition, it comes from reinterpretation. When you change your thought, you change your brain. When you change your brain, you change your life. Jordan Peterson often speaks about the necessity of confronting chaos voluntarily. Pain is that chaos, the raw, untamed energy that life throws at you without asking. But by facing it consciously, you transform it into structure, discipline, and strength. What was once random begins to serve a purpose. What once felt like punishment becomes instruction. Andrew Huberman explains that when you reinterpret discomfort, your brain releases dopamine, the neurochemical of progress. Meaning turns pain into movement. That's why purpose feels lighter than suffering, even when the work is harder. Your body isn't fighting you, it's waiting for your mind to lead. Pain will shape you no matter what. The question is whether it will shape you by force or by choice. Every time you decide to see pain as signal instead of punishment, you reclaim authority over your thoughts, your chemistry, and your future. You stop asking, "How do I escape this?" and start asking, "How can this make me stronger?" That's the moment pain stops consuming you and starts building you. Because transformation doesn't begin with healing, it begins with awareness. And awareness begins with one question. What if this pain isn't here to destroy me, but to reveal who I'm meant to become? The invisible mechanism of pain. Pain is not chaos, it's communication. Every sensation of discomfort, every emotional wound, is a signal, a precise message from your nervous system asking for change. Yet most people misinterpret this signal as punishment. They assume pain means something is wrong with them, when in truth, pain means something is waking up. The human brain evolved to use pain as feedback, not as failure. It's a biological alert system designed to provoke adaptation. When you feel pain, your body isn't attacking you, it's teaching you. Neuroscience shows that emotional and physical pain share the same neural pathways. The anterior cingulate cortex, the region that lights up when you burn your hand, also activates when you experience heartbreak or rejection. The brain doesn't distinguish between a broken bone and a broken trust. Both trigger the same survival response, flooding your system with cortisol, tightening muscles, quickening the heart. But here's the paradox. While pain demands your attention, your interpretation determines your chemistry. If you see pain as danger, the body prepares for defense. If you see it as a signal for growth, the same energy becomes fuel for resilience. Andrew Huberman describes this as neural framing. The brain's response to any experience depends on how you frame it. When you attach meaning to discomfort, when you tell yourself, "This is making me stronger," your dopamine system begins to work with you, not against you. Dopamine doesn't just reward pleasure, it also rewards progress. Each moment you confront pain consciously, your brain releases small doses of dopamine that reinforce courage. The same chemistry that creates despair under hopelessness becomes drive under meaning. This is the invisible mechanism. Pain is a doorway disguised as an obstacle. You either push against it until you exhaust yourself, or you step through it with awareness. In the first case, you repeat the pattern. In the second, you rewrite it. Joe Dispenza explains that the moment you become aware of an unconscious emotional reaction, you interrupt the loop that keeps it alive. Awareness disconnects the thought from the chemical chain that sustains suffering. Pain loses its identity and becomes pure information. Aristotle believed that purpose gives order to experience. Pain without purpose feels like chaos, but when you connect it to meaning, it transforms into direction. It becomes movement. This is not positive thinking, it's neurobiology. The anterior insula, another key region linked to emotional pain, also governs empathy, self-awareness, and insight. When you stay present with your pain rather than resist it, that same region helps the brain integrate the lesson instead of suppressing the memory. You evolve. So pain is not the problem, it's the messenger. But the brain doesn't stop there. It tries to interpret that message, to make sense of it. And this is where everything changes, because the thought that follows pain decides what happens next. The moment you assign meaning, the mechanism shifts. You either trap yourself in identity, or you step into transformation. The thought loop, how pain becomes identity. Pain begins as an experience, but it becomes suffering when it turns into a story. The mind doesn't replay pain because it enjoys it. It replays pain because it's trying to understand it. Yet the more you analyze the wound without changing your perspective, the deeper it embeds itself in your identity. Every time you recall the same memory with the same emotion, your brain strengthens that neural connection. The more it fires, the more it wires. Pain, repeated through thought, becomes who you believe you are. Cognitive behavioral therapy explains this through a simple cycle. An event triggers a thought. The thought creates an emotion. The emotion shapes a reaction, and that reaction reinforces the original belief. When that belief is rooted in pain, I was betrayed, I failed, I wasn't enough. Your brain builds an identity around it. The story becomes automatic. You don't need to experience new pain to feel old suffering. Your own mind supplies it through repetition. Neuroplasticity, the same mechanism that allows you to learn new skills, also allows you to rehearse misery. The brain doesn't care whether what you repeat helps or harms you. It only cares about efficiency. So it automates whatever you focus on. When you continually think of pain, it stops being a signal and becomes a lens. You start seeing the world through the fracture it left behind. You interpret kindness as pity, opportunity as risk, and love as potential loss. Pain begins to filter perception itself. Joe Dispenza calls this the memorized self, a state where emotion from the past defines who you are in the present. The body becomes addicted to the chemistry of the wound. Cortisol becomes familiar. Adrenaline feels safe. Even misery can feel like home if it's predictable. This is why many people unconsciously seek situations that match their pain, not because they want to suffer, but because they crave what feels known. But awareness breaks the loop. The moment you observe the story instead of participating in it, you step out of identification. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." That insight is the foundation of self-liberation. Pain loses its authority when you recognize that the mind, not reality, keeps the wound alive. The brain doesn't distinguish between reflection and reliving. It only knows focus. When you shift attention, you shift biology. Andrew Huberman's research on focus reveals that where you direct your gaze and mental attention changes your state instantly. If you focus narrowly on the details of your pain, your brain stays in alert mode. But when you widen your mental view, when you contextualize pain as part of a larger story of growth, your body lowers stress hormones and activates circuits of perspective and creativity. Pain no longer isolates you, it informs you. Identity built from pain is fragile, but identity built from understanding is unbreakable. The thought loop can only trap you when you forget that you're the one thinking. You can rewrite the narrative at any time. The story of "I was hurt" can become "I learned." The story of "I was broken" can become "I'm rebuilding." The facts don't change, the frame does. And when the frame changes, the mind follows. Your next step is to learn how to make that shift consciously, to interrupt the mental patterns that imprison you and build new ones that set you free. Because if pain is energy, then thought is the switch that decides where that energy flows. The shift, how to change the thought that holds you hostage. Transformation begins in the exact moment you catch a thought trying to repeat the same story. The shift doesn't happen through force. It happens through awareness. You can't silence your mind, but you can teach it a new language. The difference between a thought that destroys you and a thought that frees you lies not in its content, but in your response to it. When you stop reacting and start observing, you reclaim authorship. The mind is a storyteller, and every time you change a sentence, the entire story changes with it. Neuroscience confirms this truth. Every thought you think releases a chemical signature. Negative interpretations trigger cortisol and adrenaline, preparing the body for defense. Constructive interpretations trigger dopamine and serotonin, preparing the body for action. Your thoughts don't just describe reality. They create a biochemical version of it inside you. Joe Dispenza calls this the biology of belief. The brain doesn't wait for life to change before adjusting your chemistry. It follows the meaning you assign to what happens. That means a single thought can either deepen your wound or begin your healing. When you catch a recurring painful thought, "I can't handle this. I'll always suffer. Nothing ever works for me." Pause. Don't fight it. Fighting keeps it alive. Observe it with curiosity, as if you were studying your own mind. Then reframe it, not by denying its emotion, but by reinterpreting its message. Instead of, "I can't handle this," say, "This is teaching me how strong I really am." Instead of, "Why me?" say, "Why not me? What can I become through this?" That small pivot changes the entire neurochemical conversation between your brain and your body. Daniel Goleman explains this process through emotional intelligence. When you become aware of your internal state without judgment, the prefrontal cortex, the rational part of your brain, takes control back from the amygdala, the emotional reactor. This shift rewires your mental hierarchy. You move from instinct to insight, from chaos to coherence. In practical terms, you stop being pulled by emotion and start being guided by meaning. René Descartes believed that clarity of thought is the foundation of freedom. But clarity isn't given, it's cultivated. You must train your mind to separate perception from projection, to question the first narrative that arises. When pain speaks, it speaks in absolutes. Always, never, everything. When reason speaks, it asks questions. So when your mind declares, "This will never get better," answer it with logic. Never, or just not yet. That small challenge breaks the emotional trance and opens a new cognitive path. Andrew Huberman describes focus as the steering wheel of the brain. Wherever you place attention, your nervous system follows. The shift, then, is an act of redirection, taking the energy once trapped in rumination and investing it in intention. Each time you notice, question, and reframe, you train your neurons to fire in alignment with calm, not chaos. It's neuroplasticity in motion. Neurons that fire differently wire differently. This isn't positive thinking, it's conscious engineering. It's not pretending everything is fine. It's deciding to see what can be built from what isn't. The pain doesn't vanish. It transforms, because its energy is redirected toward growth. This is how the mind begins to heal itself, by making meaning where once there was only reaction. Once you master this cognitive pivot, you'll discover something remarkable. Pain carries immense energy. The more aware you become, the more you realize it was never just an emotion. It was fuel, waiting to be guided by your thoughts. And when you learn to redirect that energy consciously, you stop surviving your pain and start transforming it into power. The alchemy of pain, turning emotion into energy. Every emotion you feel is energy in motion. Pain is no exception. It's not an abstract concept or poetic idea. It's measurable energy stored in the body, electrical, chemical, and physiological. When you experience emotional pain, your body releases adrenaline and cortisol to prepare for survival. Your muscles tighten, your heart rate rises, your breathing shortens. That surge is pure power, but when you don't know what to do with it, it stagnates. Energy that isn't expressed turns inward, transforming into anxiety, exhaustion, and self-sabotage. The mind keeps replaying the pain because the body hasn't released the signal. Andrew Huberman explains that every emotional state carries a corresponding physical signature. You can't separate mind from body. The two exist as a single system of feedback. When your thoughts stay trapped in despair, your physiology mirrors that contraction. But the inverse is also true. When you change the meaning of your pain, your physiology changes with it. The brain and body communicate in a constant loop, and your interpretation of events becomes the command that directs your chemistry. That's where the alchemy begins. When you reinterpret pain, dopamine, the molecule of motivation, begins to rise. Instead of signaling defeat, your brain interprets struggle as progress. Pain, under a new meaning, becomes anticipation for growth. The same neural pathway that once triggered despair now generates drive. This is the essence of transformation. The chemical energy of suffering becomes the creative energy of purpose. Joe Dispenza often says that emotion is energy made visible through thought. The thought is the container. The emotion is the content. When you change the container, you change the direction of the energy. For instance, the adrenaline of heartbreak can either fuel obsession or discipline. The sadness of loss can either pull you into paralysis or propel you into reflection and meaning. The energy itself is neutral. Your interpretation defines its purpose. Philosophically, this aligns perfectly with Stoicism. Marcus Aurelius taught that obstacles are not interruptions of the path. They are the path. Modern neuroscience confirms what the Stoics intuited. When you face difficulty with conscious intent, the prefrontal cortex sends inhibitory signals to the amygdala, calming emotional overreaction. The energy of fear is absorbed by focus. This is how self-mastery is built, not by avoiding pain, but by learning to redirect it. To turn pain into energy, you must give it a task. Energy without direction becomes destruction. Energy with intention becomes evolution. Write, train, pray, build, learn. Do anything that converts emotion into motion. Every conscious act gives your body a new context for the same sensation. The chemical storm doesn't disappear, it reorganizes. What once felt like chaos now feels like drive. Aristotle believed that purpose gives form to potential. Pain, then, is unshaped potential waiting for your command. The transformation happens not when the pain stops, but when you realize it was never working against you. It was waiting for you to use it. When you stop resisting emotion and begin channeling it, pain becomes participation in your own creation. And once you learn to move energy through thought, instead of letting it stagnate, something extraordinary happens. Your pain stops being a story of survival and becomes a story of creation. You no longer carry it as weight. You wield it as wisdom. That's the true alchemy, the moment emotion transforms into clarity and suffering evolves into strength. But this process doesn't end there. To sustain it, You must integrate philosophy and science, understanding not just how to redirect energy, but how to assign meaning to it. Because once you see pain through the lens of meaning, it ceases to be your enemy entirely. The philosophical convergence, where the mind meets meaning. At the intersection of pain, science, and thought lies a truth that every philosopher, scientist, and seeker has tried to articulate in different languages. Pain loses its power the moment it gains meaning. The mind is not destroyed by suffering. It's destroyed by the absence of purpose within it. When you give pain meaning, the same neural circuits that once signaled distress now signal coherence. The brain reorganizes chaos into order. This is where philosophy meets neuroscience, and where healing becomes transformation. The Stoics believed that it's not events themselves that disturb us, but the judgments we attach to them. Two people can face the same storm and experience completely different realities, not because the storm changes, but because their interpretations do. Modern neuroscience confirms this timeless insight. The brain doesn't respond to reality, it responds to perception. Your interpretation is your world. When you change the lens through which you see pain, you literally change the structure of your neural pathways. Meaning isn't philosophical poetry, it's biological rewiring. Andrew Huberman's studies on attention reveal that what you focus on defines your emotional chemistry. When you focus on loss, the amygdala amplifies fear. When you focus on purpose, the prefrontal cortex amplifies control. The same experience produces two different neurochemical outcomes depending on meaning. Meaning tells the brain whether to release stress hormones or growth hormones. Pain, when understood, stops being chaos and becomes instruction. René Descartes sought to find order within uncertainty through methodical doubt, questioning every assumption until truth emerged. You can apply this same discipline to your own pain. Question it. Interrogate the story your mind tells you about what it means. Ask, is this pain proof of my weakness or evidence of my growth? Each question disrupts the automatic loop of suffering and engages your rational mind, the part of you designed to lead, not to follow emotion. This act of reflection, of turning pain into inquiry, activates what neuroscientists call metacognition, thinking about thinking. In that state, the mind separates from the storm and begins to observe it from above. Clarity is born. Montaigne wrote that man suffers more from his imagination than from his wound. Today, brain imaging validates that statement. The default mode network, the brain system responsible for rumination, keeps pain alive through imagination. When you repeatedly imagine the worst, your body reacts as if it's happening again. Meditation, reflection, and reappraisal deactivate this network, returning you to the present moment. Awareness becomes the cure because awareness breaks repetition. Meaning, then, is not a luxury of the intellect. It's the medicine of the mind. It transforms pain from something happening to you into something happening through you. The Stoics understood this, as did every philosopher who sought serenity in an unpredictable world. They discovered that meaning transforms chaos into cosmos, disorder into harmony. The modern mind, guided by neuroscience, now understands the same principle. Attention plus interpretation equals transformation. When you merge philosophy's wisdom with science's precision, pain stops being a random force and becomes part of your psychological evolution. You begin to see that everything you've endured was not just survival, it was education. You were learning how to think differently, how to feel deeper, and how to exist with more awareness. Pain was your tutor, not your tormentor. And when the lesson is understood, the energy that once created tension now creates purpose. The suffering that once fragmented you becomes the structure that sustains you. What began as despair transforms into design. That's the convergence, where knowledge meets consciousness, and where thought transforms existence itself. From here, only one realization remains: the transition from pain to wisdom. Because meaning gives direction, but wisdom gives peace. the state where you no longer need to resist what once defined you. Transformation. From wound to wisdom. Every wound carries a story, but not every story needs to end in suffering. When awareness meets pain, wisdom begins. The transformation from wound to wisdom isn't a miracle. It's the natural consequence of conscious reflection. Pain without awareness is trauma. Pain with awareness becomes evolution. You don't erase what happened. You reinterpret it until it teaches you something powerful enough to outweigh the hurt. That's when pain changes its name and becomes experience. Neuroscience shows that the brain is constantly updating its internal map of the world. When an event wounds you, your brain records not only the memory, but also the emotional charge attached to it. The more you replay the event with the same emotion, the stronger the association becomes. But when you revisit that memory with understanding, your prefrontal cortex sends inhibitory signals to the amygdala, calming its emotional response. The memory remains, but the pain dissolves. What once triggered suffering now triggers perspective. That's what wisdom is, emotion reorganized by clarity. Joe Dispenza calls this process neurochemical emancipation. It's the liberation of the self from old emotional identities. When you stop identifying with your pain and begin identifying with your awareness of it, you stop living as the wound and start living as the one who healed it. Your thoughts, once chaotic, now serve structure. Your emotions, once reactive, now respond to meaning. The mind and body synchronize around understanding. The result isn't detachment, it's serenity. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the obstacle is the way. Modern psychology translates this as post-traumatic growth, the ability to use adversity as the foundation for higher consciousness. Resilience is not resistance, it's adaptation. It's the art of extracting wisdom from what tried to break you. When you stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and begin asking, "What did this awaken in me?" you shift from survival to authorship. You take command of your story. This transformation doesn't demand perfection, it demands presence. To feel fully, think clearly, and act deliberately. Wisdom is not the absence of pain, it's the mastery of its energy. You learn to hold pain without letting it consume you. You can look at your past without reliving it, speak about your scars without trembling, and love without fear of loss. The same fire that once burned you now becomes the light that guides you. René Descartes would say, "This is where reason meets transcendence, when thought becomes the instrument through which the soul understands itself." The clarity of your thinking builds the structure of your peace. You no longer depend on external stability to feel safe. Stability grows from within. The wound once fragmented your mind, but reflection reassembled it stronger, more ordered, and infinitely more compassionate. And this is the true transformation. You stop trying to escape pain and start using it as material for consciousness. Every scar becomes a line of wisdom written into your story. Every fall becomes a lesson in humility and strength. The pain you once resented becomes the proof of your capacity to endure, to learn, to create meaning out of chaos. That is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of mastery. Because pain was never your punishment. It was your initiation, the first language of your own becoming. And now that you've learned to translate it, you no longer fear it. You thank it, you use it, and you move forward, not wounded but wise.